So I have this question every single day. Is the housing market going to a bubble? Is it correcting? What's happening right now? And I'm about to tell you exactly what's happening right now. So stay tuned, we're getting started right now. Hey y'all, I'm Debbie Dobbins. I'm a real estate entrepreneur here in Wichita Falls. I do mortgages, I do real estate, I do all kinds of things. But the fact of the matter is that I am what I refer to myself so lovingly as an economic savant. I've been following the economy for decades, and I swear the economy is so simple to understand, yet people make it so complicated. But I'm going to share with you some really important information. And if you're following the news at all of the headlines about the conditions in the current housing market actually can leave you with your head swimming, with more questions than answers. And I want to clear something up right now. Is the boom over? Everybody wants to know that. When are the prices going to come down? Ugh. That's because everybody is comparing what's happening right now with what happened in 2008. I've done video after video after video. We are not in the same economic position that we were in 2008. It was completely different. So when you say, is the boom over? Is the market crashing? Well, how about we just call it correcting? I've said that many, many times. Correcting and flattening is not crashing, and it's not a bubble bursting. So here's what you need to know. The housing market is, let's just call it, for lack of a better word, moderating. It's moderating itself. It's correcting, for lack of another term. But compared to the last 2 years, oh my gosh, we need a little moderation, right? Everyone says, do everything in moderation. Don't eat 14 hot fudge sundaes in one sitting. Eat one or eat 3 scoops. But here's the thing. If you compare anything to the last 2 years, that's an unrealistic comparison. Because even though the market is not a bubble, there's a lot of reasons why the market did what it did in the past 2 years. And I've done several videos on that. I encourage you to go find them. But the fact is that there's links up here as you listen to this video. But what everyone needs to remember is that these past 2 years were, record-breaking. They were record-breaking in nearly every way. So when you have record-breaking anything, when you go back to normal, because that's what we're doing, we're just normalizing ourselves right now. When you go back to normal, it seems like, oh God, really? Can I get an amen? Yes. We had some of the things that created this market. I mean, I shared them many times, but we had low interest rates that were historical. They were unbelievable. I did my own loan in the beginning of this, in the very beginning. And of course, I get a little bit better rate than what I give my borrowers because I don't have to charge myself any fees. However, my interest rate on my house, on my own personal mortgage, is 2%. We haven't seen that forever. As a matter of fact, last night I was quoting loans and they were 7%. So the thing is that we had the most astronomical low mortgage rates that we have seen in the history of our country. Well, of course, everybody wants to get on that bandwagon. And at the same time, millennials reached their peak home buying years. And millennials for years, right after 2008, said, no way, Jose, I'm never buying a house. I watched what happened to my parents. Well, they aren't doing that anymore. They reached their peak home buying. They figured out, oh, look at those interest rates. Those are crazy. And then they came into the market with a bang. Oh my gosh, it was like a tsunami. So then we have this influx of buyer demand. So you got low interest rates, high buyer demand, and then, oh, what happened? At the same time, there weren't enough houses to sustain that in any market. Not any market. Because back in 2008, the home builders stopped building. I've done videos on that. Please go review some of them. But the fact of the matter is it was a perfect storm, because they stopped building in 2008 and then they were underbuilding for so many years after that. And then the sellers who held off on listing their homes due to health crises from, I don't know, that crazy little thing called COVID. I mean, you just had layer upon layer upon layer of why the valuations of homes went up so much. There was nothing that anyone could do because it was a confluence of circumstances. And I just did a video on the Fed and the interest rates, but they couldn't change that. They couldn't stop that. It was already predestined to happen. So this combination led to record breaking interest rates, but record high demand and record low supply. So I've talked about the economy so many times, and it's so simple.
Economics 101. Simple, 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 simple.
And then, you can just get a master's degree or do whatever you want. But the fact of the matter is that when you have an undersupply and an overdemand, guess what? Prices go up. It's just supply and demand. That's all economics is. But when you have this record low supply, you couldn't have a sustainable anything for the long term, because they want to get these deals and they can't find them because there's nothing out there to buy. And it still continues to this day. And if you've listened to me at all, you know that even when the rest of the country starts to flatten, Texas is not going to be one of them, because we don't have enough supply, they can't build enough, and people want to come here in droves. If you want to buy any place on the planet and still get reasonable prices, and I know. If you live here, you think, oh my gosh, the values have gone up so high. Well, the fact of the matter is that there's people from outside of the area that would love to have our prices. So it's still a value, but the latest data shows these early signs of a shift back to the market pace seen in the years leading up to the pandemic, because that's when people think it happened, that's what caused it to happen, and that's absolutely false. That happens to just be one leg of that table that I just explained, those 4 reasons. This is not a crash. I don't call it a correction. And Realtor.com says this: the housing market is at a turning point. So what is it turning into? Well, we're starting to see signs of a new direction. So one of the things that Realtor.com has is access to what's called showing time, and it shows the home showings then and now for over a period of time. And what they do is they gauge what's happening in the market. It's always about the leading indicators of what's about to happen. The home showings then and now tracks that traffic, and these showings, according to agents and brokers, it's a good indication of this buyer demand. So here's a look at that data going back 2019. There's a graph you can see, and it's actually quite interesting. The 2019 numbers give such a good baseline of pre-pandemic demand, right? 2019 was what was our last normal market, pre-pandemic and right before the craziness happened with all the 3 factors that I just shared with you. But this graph indicates home showings skyrocketed during the pandemic, which is hilarious because most people thought they were staying indoors, but they actually skyrocketed. And while this current buyer demand had begun to moderate slightly based on some of the latest data that you can see in green, the showings are still, right now, above 2019 levels. That's not a crash, people. That's just, we went up and we came back to normal. When 2008, it went up and then it went so far down, people were dying. So we are now still above 2019 levels, and since 2019 was such a strong year for the housing market, I know it's hard to think back that far. Everybody wants to look like in the last 5 minutes. But 2009 was a hugely strong year for the housing market. So this graph helps you see that the market isn't crashing. I repeat, the market isn't crashing. It's just at a turning point that it's moving back towards normal. Wouldn't I be grateful if it was normal again? I love normal. I love normal in Wichita Falls, especially because if you go anywhere outside of this area, in any of these big cities, in any state of the union, but especially in Texas, the fight for getting a house is just mind-blowing, and it's very stressful. The existing home sales, then and now, are also talking about how existing home sales are declining. But perspective matters. Why? Well, here's a look at the existing home sales going all the way back to 2019 using data, again, the National Association of Realtors. And keep in mind, we went up, whoa, and then we're just coming back to the same place that we were in 2009. In that graph, you can see that a similar story emerges. The pandemic numbers shown in blue beat the more typical year of 2019 home sales, which are in gray. And according to the latest projections for 2022, these are projections that come from people that actually know these things, the Association of Realtors and Showing Time and a whole lot of other places. But they're in green. They are on pace to close this year with more home sales than 2019 as well. So we're not going to hit a crash. The market could be correcting, if you want to use that term, but it's correcting to where it was. Not down, it's just moderating. So it's important to compare today, not to the abnormal pandemic years. That's the important part. These last 2 years they were so crazy for so many reasons. Think about your life and all the things that have happened and all the things you never believed could happen. But to the most recent, you look at where we are now and what the recent normal was in 2009 and shows you that the current housing market is still so super strong. And I did a video on the interest rates. You can go watch that. That's not going to last. So you might want to just take a beat before you buy a house, or you buy a house and you refinance in 6 months, because I'm telling you, I predict that we're going to have a refinance boom. Done it before, doing it again. We can sum it up like this. Today's housing market looks a lot like the 2019 housing market, which was the strongest housing market in a decade when it happened. It was crazy. So if we get to there, we're doing pretty darn good. If recent headlines are generating a concern, look at more typical years for perspective, because everything's about perspective. You can't look at last year or the year before with interest rates and look at them now, because interest rates are always going up and down, and the average interest rate throughout the last 100 years is 7%. I sold loans when they were 18. I've sold loans when they were 2.5. The fact is that interest rates are up and down and all over the place. This current market is not a crash. It's not a correction. It's just a turning point toward more typical, calm, sane, pre-pandemic levels. So if you have any questions about anything that I've shared in this video, you want to buy a house here, you want to talk about a mortgage, you just want to talk about what's happening in Wichita Falls, please schedule a Zoom call in the link in the first comments below, and we'll chat and I'll share all of this great knowledge and answer any of your questions. And as I always say, y'all come back now.